Welcome to the Nonprofits, the weekly show that addresses current events and news items from an atheist and secular humanist perspective. In our first segment this week, the current regime is continuing its war on DEI. Eli Slack, what kind of trouble are they causing now?
Well, in February of this year, the Department of Education rescinded grants that would have helped fund universities and nonprofits across the country. Specifically, they rescinded them specifically because these grants would fund programs dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So 8 of the affected states filed a lawsuit leading to a federal district court to order the Department of Education to reinstate the grants. So then following that, the Justice Department, presumably at the behest of the Department of Education, filed a request to the Supreme Court to pause the federal district court's order, which the Supreme Court has granted. So what that means is that those grants and those funds will remain unavailable, and a better society will remain tragically out of reach. The story is from CBS News by Melissa Quinn, published on April 4th, 2025.
All right, Eli. Well, I mean, the current regime obviously has declared war against DEI initiatives here. So how does this particular battle fit into that larger picture of that war?
So the idea here, I think we're probably all on the same page about this, is that like making sure that public universities are not like diverse, equitable, and inclusive is more important than making sure that they are.
We can't have that. We can't have that.
So that's sort of, I think, the message that this sends. And I think there's a common, it's pretty clear. There's a common misconception that a lot of white men have the complaint about DEI initiatives that, they don't help white men. And I think that actually, it's not the case that they can't help white men. It's just that it's not designed to help you just by virtue of being a white man.
Okay.
They can help Christian, religious people like Christian, Jewish, and Muslim and Hindu people, as well as atheists. They can benefit neurodiverse individuals, such as those with like ADHD and autism, benefit single working parents, veterans, like, are we trying to say there's no like straight white male veterans? So it's not an attack on anyone. It's just forcing, to share the stage, like just because you're a white, like you weren't born. There's nothing about the way you were born that makes you deserve anything any more than anybody else.
Right. Well, I suppose when you have privilege your whole life, then when that privilege is taken, then it seems like persecution. It seems like, you lost your crutch. And so now, you have to walk on your own. And apparently that's a big a drawback or something. Jonathan, let's jump over to you here. In the article, they said, quote, Attorney General Pam Bondi said that the ruling, quote, vindicates what the Department of Justice has been arguing for months. Local district judges do not have the jurisdiction to seize control of taxpayer dollars, force the government to pay out billions, or unilaterally halt the president's policy agenda. Do you think Bondi's claim that the courts are overstepping holds water?
Not at all. She obviously doesn't know her job very well. That doesn't surprise me. She was also AG in Florida before she got this job. And,
right.
So she's notorious, but the thing that bothers me the most is that her assumption that the courts don't mean anything to the presidency or the administration. That is absolutely false. Any court can stop an action of the administration if that administration is breaking federal law. And with the current administration, that's not an unusual occurrence, apparently. But yeah, if the lower court, district court, says, okay, you can't do this because it's unconstitutional, they have the option of what they did here, bring it up to the Supreme Court. And if they do, the Supreme Court has the option of saying, no, we're not going to look at this. It depends on how busy they are, a bunch of other stuff, what the merits of the case are, what the findings of facts were. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this. It's very complex. But they definitely have the right to tell the administration to stop. Otherwise, our government is broken. And that, I think, is the baseline thing they want to do here. They want to make sure that even the courts can't stop what they're trying to do for an authoritarian government. And that, to me, is criminal in itself, un-American in itself. It's absolutely un-American. And Pam Bondi knows better than this. She does have a law degree. You'd think she would have at least taken one course in the Constitution. Being it's the highest law of the land, people, you can't just willy-nilly decide that it doesn't apply to you.
Right.
The courts decide that, and the Supreme Court is the supreme arbiter of the courts. So if it goes to them and they say, okay, the lower court probably didn't need to do this, or I don't think it's the same thing, or they have another argument, then fine. The Supreme Court tends to take cases that involve a possible constitutional crisis, which is courts tell them to do something and they don't do it, is a constitutional crisis. And there's no checks and balances anymore at that point. There's no way that if you are unjustly treated by your government, that you can raise that up to the government in the justice system and get justice for an illegal or unjust act. So that's my opinion on that. That quote is just totally off the wall.
Yeah, and I think what's ironic about it too is that what she's saying is that, how dare you, courts? You're one branch of the government. You can't unilaterally stop this other branch of the government from unilaterally deciding what money goes where. How dare you?
It's their job. That's what they do.
Exactly, right? I mean, that's literally why we have the multiple branches of the government, is for those checks and balances. And so trying to say that, employing those checks and balance is somehow unilaterally designating billions of dollars. No, this is money that Congress already vote. They've already designated for this kind of thing, and that's really their job, right? That's Congress is the one who controls the purse strings, and so that's really, really off the mark, and it's very frustrating to hear this kind of thing over and over and over again, and it's just enough to drive a person crazy. So having said that, let's jump back to Eli here.
and Eli, just real quick, because I know you got a question for me, but before we finish, I bet she probably did take exactly one Constitution course, and it was probably something like a biblical interpretation of the Constitution, or whatever.
That could be. So, well, Eli, you as we were just talking about, we see that DEI is really being mischaracterized here, and that's merely to what DEI does is it's intended to level the playing field for groups that are starting out at a disadvantage. It's not the theory behind this philosophy is not to raise one group up above any other group. It's to balance that playing field. It's to give them a leg up, but it's to give them a leg up from the hole that they're in, not to get a leg up over any other group. So why would this current regime be against that kind of thing?
Because, and you kind of touched on it earlier, it not only is it doesn't feel to the people that have the leg up already, when you give everyone else the same leg up, it doesn't feel like everyone else is getting a leg up. It feels like you're getting dragged down. And they feel like they feel like when you're used to winning at the expense of everyone else, and then that stops happening. Now you're not winning as much because we're taking care to make sure that your success is not at the expense of others. And so when that success starts to decline or change or whatever it may be, now you start to feel like you're at a disadvantage, and that disadvantage is being manufactured by this thing that is giving other people the same, not the same advantages you have, but just leveling the playing field so that your advantages don't really come into play unfairly when they shouldn't. So it's this idea that it's the idea of taking the least persecuted group and convincing them that they're being persecuted. And we see that in like a couple of different contexts that we talk about a lot, but that's what's happening here. It's the idea that DEI is persecuting white men because like, oh, I lost my job, because of DEI. Well, that means that you only had your job because you were a white man. So
right.
like shut up and let somebody qualified, take your position. Like,
right. We shined light on the problem. Is that that shouldn't be an issue, right?
That means it worked.
So are you saying then that opposition to these policies is to protect a privilege, or is it to specifically to put down these other groups? I mean, is it positive discrimination for oneself, basically? I mean, the people that are pushing these kind of things through are, largely white male Americans. And, is it just to push up that group, or is it to push down the other group, or is it just a lucky happenstance that they get to do both at once?
I think probably, if I'm being charitable, it's more likely that more human behavior is motivated by selfishness than by malice.
Right.
So I think, if I'm being charitable, I could probably be convinced with little effort that it's just for the purpose of maintaining the advantage, because like when you're succeeding, you don't want anything to affect that or like get in the way of that. So I can empathize with that instinct, but it's not conducive to like a society, I guess.
Right. So you're saying it's more just these marginalized groups are really just collateral damage, and it's just, hey, we're sorry, we didn't want to, but we had to maintain the status quo, and it's just kind of the price of participation in this game, right?
Like it's like you or me, and if I can silence you, I don't have to think about you, and so then it's just me.
Right.
I don't have to feel that.
Yeah. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that this is a discriminatory process, or is that is that a feature or a bug?
It's a feature. This is actually, they're racists. Let's face it. They're racist. These people they're attacking are not of their tribe, and they just feel like the America should be for white cis male heteronormative people, and everybody else should just be servants. That's it. And women included are not part of this. It's male. And since the men have been losing their competitive edge because they no longer have the system working to give them a competitive edge,
right?
Once that's gone, they have to be like everybody else, and they can no longer claim to be better than people just by existing.
Okay,
and so that is
you don't have to work for it, right? You got to work for it now.
Yeah, and the administration is doing a backwards somersault to a catch-22 landing. So that's how they're trying to manipulate the narrative of it, not what's actually happening, but the narrative that they want everybody to believe is happening. And that's what they've been doing for a lot of things. The first thing that I think of when I think of these sorts of activities is that they're attacking what is preventing them from doing what they want. So if you're attacking DEI, you don't want equality.
Right.
You don't want diversity.
Right.
Right. You don't want any of that. You don't want any of that quote unquote wokeness. You don't want people to be taking into account that some people in certain societal groups are not allowed to do certain things. They say, well, they're this or they're that, they're lazy, they're this or that, and or they're some other derogatory term. And the thing is that's not the case at all. What it is they want to make it look like their oppression of a group is actually a good thing.
Right. Reestablishing fairness and that kind of thing, quote unquote.
Meritocracy. Well, if it was a
Right.
meritocracy, there's nothing to change.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's what I mean. A twisting backwards somersault to rationalize that, so that's a catch-22. You can't do it either way and still
Right,
get away.
right. Yeah. Well, we haven't really talked about the specifics of these grants that are being canceled, and two of the targeted grants are funding for a program called the Teacher Quality Partnership Program, and also the other one was the Supporting Effective Educator Development Program, both of which are intended to give new teachers the support and development opportunities they need to become the high quality educators that we need. We need to have good teachers in this country. And, the way to do that is to work from the ground up. We need to attract qualified teachers, attract talented teachers, but then we also need to support them and to nurture them. Teaching is a difficult profession. I've been a teacher myself for over 25 years, and we know that nearly half of all new teachers leave the profession within their first 5 years, and that to me, that's an amazing statistic there. And you don't see that very often. That high level of attrition at such an early moment. And so it makes all these support programs all that more important. So it boggles my mind to even have to ask this question. We'll go to Eli with it first. How could undermining education be seen as a good thing?
Well, I mean, you have to take on a perspective that is antithetical to humanism, I think. I think it is in the best interest of the ruling class that those without it or those outside of it are uneducated or ignorant, can't think about or comment on or speak intelligently or engage critically about the goings on of the world. And if that's the case, then they're just kind of forced to listen to what, they're being told. And, there's not really when you don't really have a good method for determining who's telling the truth or not, and the answer is that nobody is, then you can get away with whatever you want. Like we were saying earlier, that the day the internet gets cut off, as you said, is the day something major just happened.
Right.
So yeah, if they can keep people ignorant, if you can undermine education, you can keep your population ignorant, but you can control an ignorant population.
So are you saying that there's an aspect of risk management here? Right. I mean, just remove possible future threats. I mean, is that kind of the deal, or is it merely just almost an opiate of the masses kind of thing? Just keep the masses dumb and obedient, and keep the dollars flowing in, I guess.
Yeah, little column A, little column B.
Right.
I think. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that, if you have the only way you have a democracy or a republic is with an educated populace. Thomas Jefferson pointed that out. So now, if you dumb down the population, then you control the absolute narrative. We're doing the right thing. The economy's going fine. It was the last guy who had the greatest economy and greatest recovery we ever had who messed it up for you. And then things that are not in control of the government. The economy is not completely in the control of the government. It's more in the control of the boardrooms across the world. So, it's like there's very little the government can do when there's inflation and things like that. There's a lot they can do by, regulation and things like that. And the Federal Reserve has more power than any other branch of the government. So, but the people who take credit are the people who were elected, even though they probably did very little that actually had an effect. So, it's like the whole thing is the same thing. Keep your people to where they don't understand what's going on. You can make everything black or white to them. There's no nuance. So they can just do what you tell them is white, and everything that's black is everything that everybody else wants. So that's the the propaganda point is control the narrative. And to do that, you can't have people who think for themselves or have independent sources of information.
Right. So Jonathan, I think we got time for one more quick question, and I want to direct this one to you, and I'll apologize in advance. I want to ask you to take the position of the other perspective on this problem here. So the current occupant of the White House was elected by the American people to take the helm and steer the ship, as it were. Isn't this type of action just another way for a leader to provide guidance for the nation they've been entrusted with?
Allegedly elected. Anyway, the whole idea is that yes, the mandate is not a full mandate because he didn't win 100%. There are still constituencies that he has to represent. Mm-hmm. And by deliberately targeting those constituencies, he is not anybody. The current administration is doing things that are pretty much beyond the pale. Most of them, most of this DEI canceling stuff is illegal. Congress passed these grants, passed this money for that, defined how they were supposed to be spent, and developed the rules for it. So Congress makes the laws. The administration does not.
Right.
The administration is there to implement the laws as described by Congress.
Right.
So this is another constitutional crisis going on. If you decide to take the legislative branch into your own hands, what's that say? So that's what I'd like to leave it with.
Good question. Yeah. And I think that's a good place for us to close out our discussion here. But if you're interested in more nonprofits discussion, click one of these links and follow us right here.